Hi, I'm Rachel Kane, author of the Morganville Vampires series, and you're listening to GenreTainment.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of GenreTainment over at sci-fi-pulse-radio.com. We're your hosts, Marx
and Julie, and GenreTainment is where we talk about what's happening in the world of film, TV, and web series. This is where we give you interviews with writers, directors, producers, and actors in both independent and not-so-independent creations. Now, for this episode, we are speaking with New York Times and USA Today best-selling thriller author Joanna Penn.
We discuss Penn's life change from IT consultant to full-time award-winning self-published author and public speaker. We learn about her supernatural thriller series ARKANE and her London Psychic series. We also talk about her nonfiction books for writers, and she gives us some solid tips for becoming a writer.
Now, before we start the interview, we want to point out that the music you just heard at the beginning of the show was a snippet from the theme song from our web series, Reality on Demand. It was a song composed and performed by our friend Tishan Hardy. And you can find our web series at realityondemandseries.com.
Now let's get to our interview with writer Joanna Penn.
Hi, Joanna. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Now, you do have an interesting background living in London and once living in Australia and New Zealand. And you have degrees in psychology and theology. And you were also an IT consultant for many years. So what motivated you to move full-time into the world of writing?
Wow, that's a big roundup.
I thought I would get it's sort of like exposition on parade. How did I do? I feel like Giles in the Buffy episodes.
Yeah, that's really swift kind of. That encompassed quite a few years. But yeah, basically, I guess taking it way back. I did this degree in theology at Oxford, and when you leave Oxford and you have a student loan, people try and recruit you into these companies. So I got recruited into Accenture, which is this large consulting firm, and then essentially spent 13 years implementing IT systems into corporate, specializing in accounts payable. I mean, you can't get more boring than this, right?
Well, and I'm trying to understand how psychology and theology led to that.
Well, they don't. I don't think I'm the only person who has a degree in something that doesn't relate at all. But, essentially then I spent those 13 years when I was a consultant trying to get out of my day job. And I started a scuba diving business, and I tried property investment, and I moved around the world. As you say, I lived in New Zealand, Australia, I lived in Europe. I've worked a lot of places. And each time just things were going wrong and wrong and wrong. And eventually I decided, and I'd never written a book before, but I'm a massive reader, always read a lot. I decided, I would write a book on how to enjoy your job, because how could I, an intelligent woman, find myself in a life where I did not enjoy my day job? It just seemed
very
ridiculous
easily.
To me. Yes, but isn't that the truth, right? You take a job when you're 21 because you want to pay off your debt, and 13 years later, you find yourself still doing the same job because just year after year, the golden handcuffs, blah, blah, blah. And I had a house and a mortgage and all the things, and a car and blah. And I was questioning my whole life, basically. How come this is what the world says I should do, and I'm not happy? So writing that first book, it does exist now as Career Change, a book called Career Change, I discovered that I really enjoyed writing books, and I started a blog, as you do. And then I started writing and discovered NaNoWriMo. So I don't know if your listeners might not know NaNoWriMo, NaNoWriMo, NaNoWriMo.org, is essentially National Novel Writing Month. And the aim is to write 50,000 words in a month. And I managed 20,000. I've never written fiction before, and I got the bug. So basically that started me off. I always read thrillers, and I enjoyed the Da Vinci Code. I like, because of my theology degree, I'm not a believer, but I love religion and all that goes into that, and the supernatural and demons and stuff, and Stephen King.
Now
and
you're talking
so
my language.
Yeah, right. So I like lots of that. So I thought I'll just write that. It'd be great, And I loved it. I had such a good time, and so that was 2009. I started writing fiction, and that pretty much kicked me off, and I was able to leave my day job in September 2011 to be a full-time author entrepreneur. So I combine fiction, non-fiction, professional speaking, and other things, really.
So you're definitely touching on things that we like. Marx actually has a degree in psychology as well.
I do, yeah.
And I'm just massively interested in theology. I am religious myself, but like I'm so interested in other religions and belief systems, and I'm always, what I love about it is the more you study, the more you find out like how much everyone has in common, more than not.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many great. What I like about it is it resonates with so much, and as you learn, like my latest book, Gates of Hell, is based on Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticism, sort of stuff. And as I researched that, I just found more and more cool stuff that I wanted to learn about. And they have the golem, the kind of the monster made out of clay, and I had to have him in there, and just some cool demonology that you don't even hear about. Madonna wears a Kabbalah bracelet, and they have this awesome demonology and a numerological system called gematria, where all these words have numbers associated, and then other words have the same numbers, and it's all very cool. And so I love all that stuff.
Yeah, and even besides like the demons, I've done the Dances of Universal Peace. I don't know if you've heard of that, and the first time I went, the first chanting and dancing we did was based on Muslim beliefs of like compassion and all this stuff. And then right after that, we go right into something based on the teachings of Mother Teresa. And it was just like, okay, so like these are the same ideas. It was just packaged a little differently.
Exactly.
And it was just so, and then, we end with like a Buddhist blessing. And it was like, the words were different and the tune was different and all this, but it was the same ideas behind all of them, and it was just so interesting. And so I think that what's neat is that you can use that with the psychology to kind of make all of the themes in your books so universal.
Yeah, and what I find, coming back to psychology, the Carl Jung's idea of synchronicity, I find absolutely amazing. And I have on my wall this line that says, trust emergence, because when I get an idea for a story and then I start researching, it's like I find the things that will feed the story, and I assume like this is going to happen, and then I find things that really happened that support the story. And the first book, Pentecost, I wrote just before Carl Jung's Red Book came out, which is his journal and paintings from his nervous breakdown, never been published before. And it came out just as I'd already written this Pentecost, this book. And in it is a painting that precisely matched one of my scenes in the book.
Oh, wow.
And it was just like, wow, that's synchronicity, things that just come out of that kind of collective subconscious. It's anyway, yes, really exciting.
I like that idea. Yeah.
So when you start writing, what was some of the biggest challenges you faced starting out?
Yeah. Besides never having done it before.
Well,
yeah, well, I was going to say, yeah. Do you mean fiction or non-fiction specifically?
I'd say fiction.
Yeah, fiction.
Obviously you did a lot of writing non-fiction for papers at Oxford, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
If I had to do it here, I'm guessing you had to do it there.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think most people could probably structure a non-fiction book, and it's just you give some information. But fiction, that probably the thing that you realize first up is that what's in your head doesn't necessarily come out on the page like you expected. And that also, even if you've read thousands of books, which I have, you try and construct a story and you suddenly realize that you might not necessarily know how to structure a story. So even basic things, and I know you've covered, the same thing as like TV has a point of view, or a film. I know you have a lot of directors and people on the show. A camera angle, for example, could be considered a point of view, and you see things with certain character, a scene in a certain place. Something has to happen. You have to evoke emotion. You can't, like, for me, I love big explosion movies. Like Con Air is probably my favorite movie. But then you try and portray that in a book, it's very different to portraying that in a film.
It does move a little slower, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, you can't just say, well, you can say then everything blew up, but that's not really good enough. So
the end. It all blew up. The end.
Yeah, the end. So you have to go a bit deeper, and that's what I like. It's difficult, but it's what I like about writing novels as well, is that I can, like we're saying, the psychology of religion, I can go into a character's thoughts as to what they think. Like I've got a guy in one of my books who about eugenics, about he believes that breeding out the bad people in the world will make for a better humanity. Now, he believes in making humanity better, but the way he believes in doing it is not necessarily a way that you and I would agree with. So it's interesting putting yourself into the head of somebody like that. So I think when you start writing fiction, you realize so much that you don't know.
Yeah.
And then you learn that stuff. So, I learned this. I've done courses, I've read all the books, I've paid for a lot of professional editors and learned the craft. And this is another thing I love about writing. I'm sure you guys agree. You never stop having to learn. I mean, the moment you master one thing, you move on to something else.
Yeah.
And that's part of the joy of it.
Yeah, and I love that you're talking about it's the way he goes about it. Because, villains are always heroes in their own minds, really. I mean, they think they've got it all figured out. They're not the bad guy in the black hat twisting the handlebar mustache going, "Mwahaha." Well, I guess they could. That might be fun.
Well, except in Austin Powers, the Doctor Evil.
Yeah. He just knew. He was upfront about it. He's very on the nose. He's evil.
So let's talk a little bit about your fiction books.
Yeah.
Now, you have your thriller ARKANE series. So tell our listeners about that.
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to write a series that basically I could use to investigate religious thriller mysteries around the world. So the original idea was stemmed. I went to Varanasi in India and saw the burning ghats where they burn the bodies on the banks of the Ganges and then sweep the ashes in, and those people escape the cycle of life and reach nirvana. And I was like, that's amazing, I got to have that in a book. And that's actually the opening of one of my books. But I thought, I want to write something that is not just a standalone, so that I can have a character go around the world doing cool stuff. So I came up with ARKANE, which is the ARKANE agency. It's a secret government agency that's under Trafalgar Square in London. It's kind of a bit Torchwood style-y. I was quite influenced by Torchwood, but they investigate religious mysteries. And my main character, Dr. Morgan Sierra, just happened to do psychology and worked for the Israeli military. So she's brought up Jewish, but mixed kind of heritage. And mixed race, and basically goes around the world solving these mysteries and finding objects, and like the Devil's Bible, and pretty much 95% of what's in my books are based on true locations, true historical objects, real research. And then what I do is I just twist it a little bit. So Pentecost is based on the Pentecost stones, which I made up, but they are with the bodies of the apostles, the 12 apostles, and their bodies are around the world, basically. So that's very cool.
Basically, someone could take a trip around the world and go to the tourist sites that you have in your books.
Oh, yeah. And what I enjoy I put at the end of my books, I have an author's note, and it tells people what is real and what I basically made up. And I love getting emails from my readers that say, one reader, for example, I've got One Day in Budapest, which is based in Budapest, and they actually went and did a tour of Budapest based on my novel, which was so cool.
Oh, neat.
Because all the places are there, the House of Horror from the communist time, and the various, there's a labyrinth and all this different stuff. And also it means I get to indulge my big passion, which is traveling. So, for example, I love Israel, love Jerusalem, and I've got pretty much every book I have set into some things in Israel.
Well, and that was going to be my next question is, have you tried setting anything in a city or country you've not been in? So you at least have kind of dipped your toes in the waters.
Yeah, so I do both. I mean, for Pentecost, where the actual I had to go to where the bodies of the apostles are. I was looking for one in Iran, and I haven't been to Iran. I would love to go. There's some amazing cultural stuff in Iran, so I didn't go there. I had to write that chapter from Wikipedia and Flickr and things like that. It's amazing what you can find online, though. So yeah, there's some chapters where I make stuff up. For example, in Gates of Hell, I have a scene scuba diving in the Dead Sea. So I am a scuba diver, and you can scuba dive in the Dead Sea, but I haven't been, and I don't want to go. It sounds blooming awful.
It sounds first of all, a little hot. A little salty.
Yeah.
Well, anything called Dead Sea, I wouldn't be eager.
I mean, you'd have to like tie weights to yourself to make yourself sink enough to scuba dive.
Well, you have to wear serious amounts of weights, but I went and researched it. You can dive, and it's actually one of the proposed locations for the biblical cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So I had to go there, and so that was really cool. So that again is written from research. There's a video online of diving in the Dead Sea. So I do both research, but my main, one of the big things I love doing in my research process is I do get my ideas from trips, basically, and that's the first thing I do is generally try and go somewhere and come up with an idea from that environment.
Okay. Now, also, you have another series, the London Psychic series. Would you be able to explain that one to our readers?
Yeah,
our listeners.
yeah. To all of our readers here
our
today.
listeners, and hopefully your future readers. How about that?
Yeah.
That's one of those days.
Yeah, so basically I thought, everything I write is supernatural, and I thought I'm just going to write a straight crime novel, British detective crime novel. And then what was classic is I just can't write something that doesn't have a supernatural edge. I found I have a British detective, Jamie Brooke, and then her partner in solving these mysteries is actually a psychic who is an academic who works at the British Museum, and he gets kind of pulled into this mystery. Again, they're all based in London. There's two. I'm just starting the third one. The first one is Desecration, and it opens in the Hunterian Museum, which is amazing. Again, this stems from a visit there. It is a medical specimen museum, and when I first went there, I was really viscerally, I felt in my stomach my reaction to the exhibits there, the stuff in jars.
Not to.
Well, it's amazing because then I went to the Bodies exhibition in New York.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you know about that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the plastination of the corpses, and it became utterly fascinated with this kind of thing. And then if you read the research about John Hunter, and the body snatching and the resurrection men, and that history. So basically, what the series is there's a crime that has a resonance with the past, and Jamie, who's the detective, sort of, and Blake, the psychic, solve these murders again, sort of that happen in now, but Blake can read the emotions of the past and what happened in the past. For example, in Day of the Vikings that I have, Blake has some visions and goes back and sees what happens when the Vikings invaded and stuff like that. So it's again very much, I like using what actual places in London. And Delirium, the second one, is based in mental health. You'll like the psychology. The opening murder is of a psychiatrist at the historical Bedlam, which is now the Imperial War Museum in London. So that's pretty exciting, and I love living in London. It is just catnip for writers. There's so much here, and in fact I do want to write a screenplay of Desecration or Delirium, because it, in terms of the budget, it would be smaller because it's very constrained in terms of scope, whereas my other books, I go around the world blowing stuff up. You got to do both, right? It's the fun.
Yeah. Well, if you're not enjoying what you're writing, then no one's going to enjoy reading it. So,
do they exist in the same universe? Will there ever be a crossover?
Ooh.
Oh, well, yes. Well, Day of the Vikings is actually a crossover. It has Morgan Sierra from ARKANE goes to the British Museum, visits the Viking exhibition, and meets Blake. So yes, they do. And I don't know why I ended up doing that, but I think I want. Do you know the British Museum in London at all?
Well, we've not been there.
I've been there. No.
Oh, okay. Well, there's this massive glass roof. It's beautiful. It's this whole court that has a huge glass roof. And I just looked up one day and thought, how cool would it be to bring a helicopter through this roof? And then they had this Viking exhibition and I got my idea. So that was a lot of fun.
Movie producers love that kind of thinking.
Well, this is the thing, and I think because I love action movies, like I said, I love Con Air, I love the John Woo kind of slow motion, the doves, you know, and he does a lot of doves in slow mo shots, you know. I love, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I love these action movies with lots of fight scenes and explosions. And I see, Marx, aren't you some kind of choreographer of fight scenes?
Yes.
Yeah, I've done that. I did martial arts for many years, and I do stunt work.
See, that's cool. That's really
It is fun. You know, we had one time we actually have Marx and I sword fighting on screen because we had him play a role where he would do that because we just didn't trust someone else. So like we knew we wouldn't hurt each other. So
the amount of time
that we had, we didn't have enough time to really train somebody. So we're like, well, we know we won't really hurt each other, and even if we do, what are we gonna do? We're married. You just walk it off.
Well, that's really cool. Well, my Morgan Sierra does Krav Maga because she's in the Israeli Defense Force, and so I thought, you know, I'm one of those research authors. I'm going to go do a Krav Maga class. So I went and I seriously got my ass kicked, and I went home and I was just kind of crying, going, oh, that wasn't fun. I got really hurt. And so I decided that I would just research that on YouTube.
See, we consider that fun.
I really want to, you know, my dream author photo, or, you know, is going to be me kind of in black leather fighting like Trinity in the Matrix. That's what I want to be.
I want to be able to just look like Trinity in the Matrix.
Yeah, that too would be nice.
Even if I couldn't move in that suit, I'd be happy.
Yeah, good point.
I've done some Krav Maga.
Yeah, Marx has done some Krav Maga.
It's a cool style.
I've done some other styles with him. It's been a while.
But there are a lot of good books on Krav Maga for research. So
yeah,
and there are some other reality-based martial arts there that you could use too.
Yeah. Now, with ARKANE, you said that Torchwood was a little bit of an inspiration with that organization. Was there any inspirations, TV or movie-wise, or book, for London Psychic?
Well, also for ARKANE, James Rollins, who's one of my favorite kind of action adventure authors, has a Sigma series, which I really enjoyed. For the London Psychic, as I said, I really thought it was going to be a straight detective kind of series. Didn't really turn out that way. And actually this does come from screenplay, because I have been, you know, I want to write a screenplay. I looked at ARKANE when big budget is too big, and then Broadchurch came on. Do you know, have you seen Broadchurch? Yeah, I think there's an American version now.
Yeah, they based Grace Point off of it. We didn't watch Broadchurch. We tried watching Grace Point. I'm hoping Broadchurch is better.
Well, the British Broadchurch, it's like a murder in a smaller town, and it made me think. And it wasn't story wise, it's not really a model, but it was the kind of the smaller location, the fact that it was very constrained in location. I also wanted to write something in London because I moved back here from Australia, which is a kind of cultural wilderness compared to Europe. Don't mention that to the Aussies, but it was, I moved back to London and I just suddenly surrounded by all this amazing stuff. And so and also the British people like crime books.
Yes.
So
crime shows a lot.
And crime shows. So I thought, I'm going to have a detective. I want to solve just a straight murder. And then when Blake appeared, he's half Swedish, half Nigerian, kind of mixed race. Psychic, and his whole, and then I go into the psychology of people who have these type of gifts, and it all became a bit more confusing. But I think so there is no real straight model. I mean, I love the John Connolly, Charlie Parker books. I don't know if you know them.
No, of them, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, well, Charlie Parker is a human detective. It's set in America. But
yes, we are human.
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
So anyway, but he sees, he sees dead people, and he sees there are other people in the world of these books that are not human, that are demons. And so I like mixing the kind of the human with the supernatural. Although then I wouldn't say I write fantasy. It's kind of on the edge. I like Stephen King being one of my favorite authors, and The Stand being probably my favorite book. They're all kind of good versus evil and supernatural elements, the levels of good and evil we have inside us as humans. But yeah, I mean, all of those things come into my work, really.
Yeah, you said before the interview, you mentioned how you've been playing around with genre more, and I know you've been getting more supernatural with your work. So how have you been dealing that approach with genre? Do you find it a delicate balance of trying to fit a certain genre, especially since books often get unfortunately lumped into certain genres?
Sometimes accurately, sometimes not.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, it is. Yeah, it is. I think it's really difficult with books because I count genre now as Amazon categories. So when you publish a book, you have to choose the categories where you publish. So for example, if you pick thriller, you have one other choice. So say you could pick horror, it would sit between the two, but that doesn't really suggest what type of book it is to either audience. So I think until things get more granular, you just have to choose. And my books are, set in the real world pretty much. They're contemporary thrillers, but they have this twist that some would consider to be religious or Christian. Other people would consider to be fantasy or dark fantasy. And that depends whether you really believe in angels or demons, or whether you think they are a fantasy element. And these things can be quite difficult. I've been a bestseller in Christian fiction. I've been a bestseller in horror, which implies these things are not real. So it's very difficult. So what I tend to do, as we're doing now, is I talk about, I like Stephen King, I like James Rollins, John Connolly, Jonathan Maberry. These are authors I like and I read, and their influences on me. If you like these type of books, or these type of films, then you might be interested in my work. But I think it's very difficult, and I know you guys with the GenreTainment, I mean, everybody's cross genre, aren't they, really?
Just about, yeah.
Well, and really, I mean, genre is such a broad term, really. I mean, there are some things that are just set in a completely different universe, and and then others that are, just like ours, but a few people see some ghosts,
Yeah, and
that's
like
a real big spread of difference there.
It is, and then also, like we talked about at the beginning with religion and people of faith, if you believe that these things are real, as in, the Bible says there are angels and the devil and that type of thing, if you believe they are real, then these books are not fantasy and maybe offensive, so it's a very difficult line to walk. And I generally use quotes from the Bible or things at the front of my books. And some people have said, oh, you crossed the line with this, or this doesn't exist. And I'm like, well, I do say at the beginning it is fiction or fictionalized.
You're like, this isn't really a how-to manual, okay?
Yeah, this is not. No, this is not. They were not. Well, as far as I know, they were not really the gates of hell.
You can use your imagination; it won't hurt you.
I thought this was nonfiction. This is your bio, right? What's going on?
You shouldn't strain anything by using your imagination.
No, or have fun along the way.
Yeah, reading and writing can be fun. They need to tell that to more kids and actually prove it to them.
Now,
oh yeah, definitely.
Now, every author or writer has different type of method or approach to writing. So we're wondering what.
Yes, the method question.
So we're wondering what your writing method is. So how do you go from spark of an idea to the finished book, and what does your normal writing day look like?
So I get my ideas. So this weekend, for example, we're going to go start, me and my husband have a little research trip. We're going to go research.
I like how she works.
You're going to
Well,
start
yeah,
doing that now.
Budapest. Yeah, I mean, Budapest. We spent 4 days in Budapest. We had to go do that research, But this one's not quite so far. So this is the London Psychic series. The third one's called Deviance, which you may or may not like. But it's going to be set in. My idea is that it will be based on the East End of London, Whitechapel. That kind of stuff. So we're going to go there. I'll take my diary. We'll have a look around. I'll write some notes. And then what I do then is I generally come up with some basic idea. So because this is a series, I have my characters. I have the basic structure of a murder mystery. So I have to, find a setting. I have to have a murder, and then what's behind the murder, what's the interesting theme of the book. So I tend to write a lot of notes. I've been thinking about it for a while. And then what I tend to do is I often have the first scene, which for me is a murder. I have a lot of body count in my books. So I have the murder, I'll write that so that, I'll get started by writing this murder scene. I'll probably approximately know about 10 scenes in my head of some big points of the book. And then I'll start writing. I use Scrivener, which is fantastic software, which I don't write in order. So I'll just write scenes. And then kind of after I've written about 20,000 words, I then actually try and restructure the whole thing and pick out the issues and consider what the book is really about. And then I will write the rest of the scenes essentially. And then I print out the first draft and I edit by hand the first draft, rewrite, and then I go through an editing process with a professional editor, and then I have beta readers and copy editor and stuff like that. But in terms of my average day, it will depend on what's happening on a day. I'm sure like you guys, I try and write something every day, but I mix up fiction and non-fiction. So I just finished a draft of a novella, which is One Day in New York, which is this one with the angel. That draft is finished. That's resting. So this week I'm actually writing non-fiction. Next week I'll start editing. So the days can sometimes be a bit different. I also record audiobooks. I do professional speaking. I do some other things. So, but generally I try and write most days on something new, but not necessarily fiction. I do a lot of research, as I said. Oh, and I do, just so interestingly, on the historical side, I do write a couple of days a week in the London Library, which is Bram Stoker worked there, Agatha Christie, Charles Dickens, a whole load of really famous authors have written in the London Library. So I love writing there. It's very atmospheric.
You can kind of feel the history there, can't you?
Yeah, you can, although I'm in the room with the laptops.
that might kill the mood a bit.
Yeah, definitely. But it's very cool, and I think just because you're surrounded by other people who are writing, it also, when you've spent so many years in the corporate world, you almost need the commute, the coffee shop, the working, the lunch hour.
You need that structure.
I need that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Otherwise you just find yourself kind of surfing the web for 2 hours.
Yeah, or doing, it means I have more of a structure, like you say, and like where I'm sitting right now at my desk, I do podcasting here, I do other marketing stuff. If I want to write just fiction, it's sometimes easier to do that away from the desk where I do all the other stuff.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So you do mention that you also write, we've been talking about your fiction, but you do write nonfiction. I think you started out published in nonfiction. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you've written?
Yeah, sure. So I started out with that career change book, which changed my life and sells every January to all those people who hate their jobs. But then because I had started blogging at the time at the Creative Pen, with a double N, about the process of becoming a writer and creative entrepreneur, and I learned about self-publishing because I'm one of those people who does not like to ask permission. I don't like to wait. I like to do stuff myself with other professionals. So I started to, like many people, share what I was learning online, and so I ended up, and then what happens with most people's first book is nothing sells, and then you realize you have to learn about marketing in the same way that I know independent filmmakers, independent TV shows, whatever, everyone needs to understand marketing. So I've written a book called How to Market a Book, which is again based on my experience of learning about marketing, and also public speaking for authors, creatives, and other introverts. Because believe it or not, I am an introvert. So again, that's a kind of helpful book. And my most recent nonfiction is Business for Authors: How to Be an Author Entrepreneur, which because so many creatives, and most, like 95% of the stuff in there is valid for any creative person who wants to learn business. Because I was a business consultant, I use my business knowledge as a creative, and it just frustrates me how many people are not making a good living doing something that is just amazing. And I'm very driven to be convincing that this is as good or better than a proper job. Like you can make more money being a creative than in a proper job. You can create more. You can be happier. You can leave stuff for your children. This is a just amazing career path, but you have to spend years at the beginning, building up your body of work and that type of thing.
Yeah, and it does, you do find yourself trying to justify the job to people.
Yeah.
Because you tell them, they're like, oh, so you don't have a real job.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what do you do all day?
It really does speak to that mindset you talked about, how you weren't happy with your job, where unless you're getting money from and reporting to a particular person every day, then what you do isn't legitimate or some reason.
Yeah, exactly. And I think maybe I wrote it just for my mum, but it's helping a lot of authors. Like I have a limited company. I'm very structured with the business side of things. I am an entrepreneur. I had a very good job. Money does motivate me, but I'm not going to compromise what I love as a creative. Like I said, I love explosions. I love killing people. I love graveyards, demons. And if I could write romance, I'd be a multi-billionaire, but I'm not. So
you can get a different pen name, churn one out, make a bunch of money.
I just can't do it. I cannot do it. I think this is really important. I don't believe in chasing the market, and like when I tried to write a straight detective novel, that persuaded me. Yeah. I just couldn't do it. I have this, like we talked about at the beginning, this fascination with religion, with the supernatural, with psychology. The things that you love are the things that will come out in your creative work. And I think you have to be true to that. You have to David Morrell, who wrote First Blood, great author, and someone I consider a mentor. I interviewed him, and he has had a lot of tragedy in his life. And he said, we have a very short life. We really do. And you never know when it will end. If you're not spending your time writing a book that you love, that you develop as you're writing, that changes you as much as anyone else, then what the hell are you doing? Do stuff that is worth spending time on. Yeah. For tomorrow we die and all that.
I remember a musician was talking to some people I know, and he was like, I do what I do because I love it. If I want to do something just for the money, I can go sew shoes.
Exactly, and
it's not the kind of thing you do unless you love it.
No, and there are far easier ways to make a living than being a creative.
Much easier.
Much easier, but I love what I do, and I think someone asked me the other day, oh, you're a workaholic, you work all the time. I'm like, but this is not just my work, this is my love and my hobby and my passion. It's my life. This is what I love. Like, work is fun.
Yeah, that's when you did the right thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, since I published a book not too long ago, because of that, I've gotten more involved in the whole medium of book publishing, just more interested in that world and marketing. I bought like that 3-book bundle pack where your marketing book was part of, for example. So I'm really interested, coming from more of a film background and especially also web series background. I found this really interesting parallel between independent web series creators and self-published ebook authors or just self-published authors in general, or people like authorpreneurs.
Authorpreneurs. There you go.
I think you called that.
Yeah,
before. I think that's where I got that. Okay.
But it's just fun to say. It sounds better when she says it.
Now, independent web series creators are always struggling about how to make a profit,
Yeah.
to make money for that. So I'm curious about what is the health of ebook publishing right now? What are the main platforms, and how hard is it to break into that?
Well, I'm pretty sure it's the same, and it's the same in any industry. Anyone can do this now, and anyone can put videos on YouTube. Anyone can do this type of thing. Anyone can write a book. If you buy Scrivener, which is $49, you can output a Kindle file, and upload it to Amazon for free. It is free to self-publish on Amazon Kindle, but if you actually want, like we talked about, being proud of what you create, if you want to learn how to write a proper novel, or you want to write a non-fiction book that can stand beside any traditionally published book, you do have to invest some time and money. So professional editing might be anything between $500 to $2,000 to edit a book. Professional cover design can be, $50 to $500. Those two things, I think, are non-negotiable for a successful self-published book, or any book. That's what, if you sign with a traditional publisher, and you sign a contract where you get between 10 and 25% royalty for your books, versus self-publishing where you get 70%, you can see where the balance of income is, and that is also where the balance of work is. So if you self-publish, you have to do the editing, and the cover design and the publishing. So essentially, that in terms of when you're saying the health, like, again, any creative industry, probably 95% of people who are doing it are not doing it in a professional business way. Sure, there, some people break out without putting in all the effort. Some people do just hit that zeitgeist. We can look at 50 Shades of Grey, and probably there's a lot of erotica authors who are really pissed off that, that they've been writing for 30 years, and then somebody comes along, and E.L. James comes along and screws them up. But in the same way, I think for me, so I have like 12 books now, I think. She says 8 fiction, 4 non-fiction, with a production schedule for this year. I take this very seriously as a career. Now, I'm still not making the amount of money I made when I left my day job 3.5 years ago, but I did that for 13 years. And I understand the business model of being an author. It relates to number of books out there, number of different formats, number of countries, the way you exploit your rights. So I mentioned I would like to write a screenplay. We can all do these different things. So you almost have to, if you want to make an income. So your book, for example, Marx, I would say to you, one book will never make a decent income. That would be a truism, I suppose, in the same way that one person with one episode of one web series is not going to get an audience, or however you monetize that, is just not going to happen. Or one podcast episode isn't going to do much. So I think we all, you have to build up that body of work to make money. Now, I say that, and I would say the vast majority of people self-publishing are not making that much money. But the people who are doing this as a business, who are putting out quality books that people want, and that's important too. I had a question from someone, a consulting client of mine, and she said, look, I'm doing everything right, I'm sure, why am I not selling? And the truth was, she was writing literary short stories. Now, the market for literary short stories is just nowhere, compared to genre romance or genre thriller, or the type, or sci-fi or whatever. So I said to her, look, it doesn't matter how many literary short stories you write, if you want to make money, this is not going to work for you. So she has to think about what she actually wants as an artist. So I guess that gives you, but I would, going further, I know, and I have met, and I'm friends with plenty of authors who are making extremely good money at this, 7 figures, 8 figures. We know this. I mean, if you look at the Forbes richest author list, for example, which comes out every year, authors can be multi-millionaires, just making a lot of money if you write things that people want. So again, Stephen King being one of my favorite authors. Stephen King is not a sort of fly-by-night success. He's been putting out books every year for what, 40 years?
I think I heard of that Stephen King guy.
Yeah, exactly. But he is consistent. What also encourages me, I'm turning 40 this year. If you look at that list, most of the authors are in their late 50s, 60s. They've been writing for 40 years, and they are reaping the rewards of becoming incredible artists, the top of their game, and they have the backlist to show for it. So for me, this is a long-term career. This is not a I want to get rich with one book type of thing.
So what you're saying is don't write we can't hope to write the great American novel and retire. You have to reap the benefit of an actual career.
Yes. And is that any different to any of the other industries? And I say that to people too. It's like, okay, so say you get a job as an IT consultant. How useful are you? Yeah. How useful are you in year one? You know, how much do people actually think you're worth when you're 1 year out of university? You're not worth much. 2 years, no. 3 years, no. By the time you reach 5 years, you might be worth something. Mm-hmm. By the time you reach 10 years, people are paying you decent money. So I think if you have that kind of idea that in any career, you have to put the time in to be worth something, then, that's the way it goes.
Yeah. Now, you are given a lot of good advice. Do you think you could share some tips for anyone thinking about writing a book? Maybe you can give a tip for just the actual craft of writing, and then one more for the business side, if you just really had to pick the most important things that people needed to remember.
It's really basic. But whatever you want to write, you need to read. So, if you want to write a horror novel, for example, then read a lot of horror, because you have to please those readers. If that's what you want to do. If you want to please the readers and you want to sell books, then read the books in that genre. Mm-hmm. And if you love reading that stuff, then you're far more likely to enjoy writing it. And just the follow-up piece of advice for writers is you got to write. I mean, so many people go to the conferences, they have like 50 books on writing in their bookcase, but they will not sit down and write. And yes, it's hard. It's actually really hard, but you have to do that if you want to be a writer. So read and write. It's not rocket science. But
do you find most writers have kind of a love-hate relationship with writing? I mean, are there days that you kind of hate writing but love having written?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of those. I think we all have our favorite bits of it. But there's a book that I recommend for any artist called Turning Pro by Stephen Pressfield. Do you know that book?
I've heard that, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, well, it will kick your ass, totally kick any, and it's for any creative. It's not just for authors. So Turning Pro by Stephen Pressfield, and he goes into this, the blank page, whatever, is always difficult, but that book is fantastic for kind of making you go back every day. And also he has a quote from Krishna, which I really love, which is, you have the right to your labor, not the fruits of your labor.
Oh.
Which I think, it's so good, because you're like, yes, and if I'm not enjoying the labor, then what's the point? So if you enjoy the labor, that is your right. Your right is to enjoy the work or do the work, and you don't have any right to what happens afterwards. But doing the work is the fun bit. So yeah, that would be my book for writers. And then on the business side, I think my main thing here is whenever you do anything, whether it's a web series or you write a screenplay or a novel or nonfiction, you have to decide on your definition of success. So, for example, I get a lot of people come to me, and like that woman I just said, these literary short stories were brilliant, beautiful writing. And I said to her, look, if you want to win a literary prize, then these are brilliant. So why are you complaining about your lack of sales? If you want to sell 1 million books, then you have to write the type of book that will sell 1 million books. Most Booker Prize winning or Pulitzer Prize winning books don't sell that many copies, right, compared to Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. So you have to think.
Which I might interject. I have to interject is unfortunate.
Well, but this is what's so interesting. We all like different stuff, right? Yeah. We all like different books. And this is what fascinates me, is the people that connect and have these massive breakout successes, there are reasons, and it's we have to deconstruct this in order to kind of understand it. But you have to think about your definition of success. So for me, I went to Oxford. My mum was a literature teacher. I come from a tradition of literature, and I thought I had to write that. It was only when I calmed down and thought, why do I want to write books that sell a lot of copies, and I want to make money, because money equals happy readers. If I'm making money, it's because I'm pleasing people and they love my story. So I want to be a storyteller, not a prize winner. So this is a very important distinction. So decide what your definition of success is, and that will really help you when you try and measure that success.
Well, I think both of those are excellent bits of advice for, regardless of what you do in life, whether you're a writer or not.
All right, well, it looks like we got to start wrapping things up.
But before we go, we would ask that you let everyone know where they can find you and your books online.
Yeah, sure. So my thrillers and my supernatural stuff is at JF Penn, and that's F for Francis, pen.com, pen with a double N, or on all ebook stores, print, audiobook, etc. And if you are interested in the writing, self-publishing, the marketing stuff, it's thecreativepen with a double N.com, or on Twitter at thecreativepen, where I hang out quite a lot.
Let me just say how cool it is that you're a professional writer and your last name is Penn.
I know. It's funny. It's really cool.
It's kismet.
I know, but do you know how long I didn't believe I was creative? I mean, that's a whole nother discussion, but I had an affirmation for about 4 years, which was, I am creative, I am an author. 4 years, I had to say that until it actually happened. So, yeah, it's persistence. It's changing your brain, psychology again. We're back to that. But it's been really lovely to talk to both of you. I've really enjoyed it.
Hi, this is Mur Lafferty, author of The Shambling Guide to New York City, and you're listening to GenreTainment.
Big thanks to Joanna for taking the time to chat with us. If you're interested in her thriller books or her nonfiction books, you can find the show links on the description of this episode. Before we go, we want to remind you that you can keep track of us on our GenreTainment Facebook page, Marx's Twitter account, which is at Mr. Marx, our website at GenreTainment.com, or all of the shows at SciFiPostRadio.com.
So that's it for today's GenreTainment. We'll be back soon with all new guests from our favorite films, TV shows, novels, and web series.
GenreTainment is a production of Alien Jungle Bug Productions.
Until next time.
Bad monkey.